Hi everyone. So today is Wednesday, I think the 8th of August, and I am out of commission today due to a back spasm that is just not getting any better. So it's very, very painful to move around, walk. So I'm pretty much I'm trying to get I have a wedge I'm using. There, that's better. I'm pretty much confined to bed, which is really frustrating because I feel okay other than the stupid back spasm. But I wanted to do something productive, so I decided that I'd start making a series of videos about mast cell disease and related issues that I've wanted to make for a long time. So this is part one of everything you need to know about mast cell disease. First of all, I want to say, if you find this video because you have mast cell disease yourself, or you think you might have it, if you have any questions at all, any concerns, if you just want to talk to somebody, I will leave my email in the description box. And I'm not great about checking my email, but I do get to it like usually every day. If I don't, I don't leave it too long. But don't hesitate to contact me if you want to talk privately, or you can leave a comment on this video. The comments on the videos I usually see pretty quickly. I am open to any question that you have to ask. I am a complete open book about mast cell disease and my illnesses and everything. And I do have a fair bit of knowledge about this disorder, so I can be helpful in that way. If you have questions about testing, if you have questions about diagnosis, if you have questions about medications, any of that, anything, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you just want to talk to me because you're lonely, because this is an extremely lonely disease. So anyway, just want to get that out of the way. So let's talk a little about what mast cell is. And this is going to be more for people who don't have it, don't know somebody closely who has it. It's more of an explanation at that level, okay? So your mast cells are part of your immune system. Mast cell disease, as I often call it, because it feels like a disease, the correct term is mast cell activation syndrome or mast cell activation. Oh, and now my mind just went totally blank. What's the last word? It begins with D. I'll think of it later. Anyway, so I also call it MCAS for mast cell activation syndrome. So it's really considered a syndrome because it's a bunch of symptoms and signs that belong together, that occur together, but they don't necessarily know what or the cause is, the fundamental cause that makes these things happen. I mean, we know that it's the mast cells that cause it, but we don't know sort of always what it is that makes the mast cells misbehave. So let's talk just briefly about what a mast cell does. So mast cells release chemicals that protect, ideally, when they work properly, they protect your body. So, for instance, most of us probably have at some point had an allergic reaction to something, right? Be it a bee sting or to pollen in the air, there's your two most common, or to a food. And you know how you get itchy, you may turn very red, you may swell up, and in the most severe cases, you may have what we call anaphylaxis, which is basically your body shutting down. And if it's not treated, anaphylaxis can and often used to be fatal. Now, thankfully, we know how to treat it, and usually, as long as the person either has EpiPens, and hopefully you guys know what an EpiPen is, epinephrine pen, or if they can get to care quickly, they should be okay. But anyway, so your mast cells are part of what causes all of those things to happen. So when when something enters your body that is considered a foreign substance or a dangerous substance, your mast cells react. And the way that they react is that they burst open and they release chemicals. And I don't honestly remember how many chemicals they release. I'm not even sure we know how many chemicals they release. I want to say it's at least 60 different ones that they know of so far. So there are a few common ones, histamine being the most well-known one, but that's not the only one, not by a long shot. So they release these chemicals, and these chemicals do different things to your body, to different areas of your body, to protect you from the invader. Unfortunately, for some of us, we have what's called MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome, and our mast cells react that way randomly. Now, we talk about things called triggers. Excuse me. So, some of us know what some of our triggers are. Very few people know what all the triggers are, and some people don't have a clue what any of their triggers are. And the trigger is that substance or that event that makes your mast cell burst open and put out all these chemicals. So, for example, the triggers that I know of that I have include getting overheated, dehydration, stress, and that stress can be good or bad stress, doesn't matter. I can, if I laugh too hard, if I get too excited, I will have, my mast cells will begin to, what we call degranulate. That's what's called when they let out all the chemicals, okay? So those are my sort of more common ones. I have some foods that are, I believe, trigger it, but I'm still working on that. That is, and I consider myself fortunate in that I don't have a lot of food triggers, but I have recently given up tomatoes for this reason, as I believe that they are a trigger for me, but I don't know 100% for sure. And so there are a whole range. Some people have dozens and dozens, even hundreds of food triggers. Some people get to the point where they can only eat 4 or 6 or 8 foods that are safe, considered safe for them. Some people can't eat at all and have to be fed through an IV. And if you ever read about people who are allergic to everything, that is almost certainly mast cell activation syndrome, because anything, absolutely anything in the environment and even within our own bodies sometimes can trigger a mast cell event, which we usually refer to as a flare. So let me give you just a couple other things too that are triggers for some people. Vibrations, believe it or not, can be. Mold is a very common trigger, especially for getting the disease to start out or get really bad in the first place. Lyme disease, any virus at all, or bacterial infection. Most antibiotics, many drugs are triggers, including most painkillers. So it gets very complicated when you get sick. because when you get sick with something else, it makes your mast cell disease worse, but it's very difficult to treat the mast cell disease getting worse, or treat the disease that you caused the worst thing in the first place, okay? So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about what the difference is between mast cell. Hang on, I need to. Okay, that hurt. Between a mast cell flare and a normal allergic reaction, especially a minor allergic reaction. For instance, I am allergic in Tucson, which is not where I live, but when I visit there, I notice it, and I'm allergic to basically everything that grows there. So I get the streaming eyes, my nose waters all the time, I may get sinus pain, I get headaches basically every day, and I have to treat that when I'm there. And that was true before I ever had mast cell disease. That is what I would consider a normal allergic reaction. Unfortunately, a mast cell flare is not like that. I mean, that's part of it, but it's way more complicated than that. So I have this piece of paper here. I'm going to hold it up kind of close to the camera there just so you can see. So this talks about the symptoms of mast cell activation syndrome. And what it tells you is, this does not actually cover all of them. And I will go over that. It also says patients may have a few or many of these symptoms. So these are symptoms that are caused by mast cell mediator release. In other words, those chemicals that come out of the mast cell. The systems that can be affected, the body systems, is basically everything there is. Neurological, ear, nose, throat, and respiratory, gastrointestinal, skeletal, urinary, skin, cardiovascular, gynecological, and even systemic. So, let's go through these one at a time. Sorry, I just had a twinge there. Neurological. Headaches are incredibly common, and the headaches may occur outside of just flares. You may have just constant headaches, or you may have very frequent headaches, including migraines. Brain fog. Brain fog does occur outside of flares also. I have bad brain fog, and to the point where I can't work anymore because there's so many things that I can't do. I can't think in certain ways that I need to think. I can't perform certain tasks I need to perform. Cognitive dysfunction, again, another reason why I can't work. And for me, cognitive dysfunction is constant. It's not just with flares. Anxiety and depression. And when I talk more about my flares in part 2, I will talk a little bit more about that aspect of it. Now, as far as ear, nose, throat, and respiratory issues go, you may have nasal itching and congestion. You may have throat itching and swelling. And you may have wheezing, and you may have shortness of breath. Any of those symptoms. Gastrointestinal problems are incredibly common. Basically, I have yet to meet or speak to anyone who has mast cell activation syndrome who does not have gastrointestinal problems. Those problems include diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, bloating, and GERD, or gastroesophageal reflux disease. Skeletal problems include bone pain, muscle pain, and again, those two do not necessarily, you can have those even when you're not flaring. osteopenia and osteoporosis. And if you don't know, osteopenia is thinning of the bones, but it's not as severe as osteoporosis. It's the precursor to osteoporosis. But those can be caused by this disorder. Urinary problems, bladder irritability, and the need to go to the bathroom really frequently. Skin, this is a huge one. Flushing specifically, usually of the face, neck, and chest. And this is a very specific look that it has to it, and hopefully I'll be able to show you that at some point. Hopefully not on, because I'm flaring, but it tends to be very blotchy. Sometimes it will affect, for instance, just one ear, I will find, or just this section right here, and sometimes I will be red from my hairline all the way down to just under my breasts, my shoulders, my upper back. It varies a lot. So flushing. Hives, skin rashes, and then itching. And you can see I'm like really itchy here right now for some reason. But itching can occur with or without any form of rash. And that's another thing that can occur whether you're flaring or not. A lot of these can. Cardiovascular issues. So you can deal with lightheadedness, fainting or near fainting, rapid heart rate, chest pain, low blood pressure, or in about a third of cases, high blood pressure, and also high blood pressure at the start of a reaction. So that's true for me when I go into a flare. When I'm starting a flare, my blood pressure will rise and rise dramatically, as will my pulse, and blood pressure instability. So your blood pressure is like, you never know where it's going to be. It's just all over the map. Gynecological, uterine cramps and bleeding. Thank goodness I don't have to deal with that anymore, but I used to have a lot of problems with cramping. And then as far as systemic and or organ specific, it mentions anaphylaxis, which I talked about earlier, and angioedema, which is swelling. And the swelling can, typically you'll see it mostly in the face or under, in the neck here, under the chin. Your lips can swell. That is very common. Around the eyes is very common. But basically it can occur anywhere in the body. Some people, their feet swell terribly, their legs swell terribly. It can occur anywhere. A couple things I wanted to mention that this chart actually does not cover: the neurological symptoms. Another thing is that this is specific to a flare, we have trouble with word finding anyway, but during a flare, it can actually become extremely difficult to speak. And I may have trouble putting together a coherent sentence, or my words may become very separated. I lose the fluidity in my speech. So that is another neurological symptom. Crying is a very, very common neuropsychological problem with flaring. And you may cry whether you're feeling depressed and anxious or not. It doesn't matter. It's just a chemical reaction. So I wanted to mention those two. And did it say abdominal? It did say abdominal pain, but that abdominal pain can take on a lot of different there's a lot of different types. So for me, it's usually associated with the diarrhea. I don't tend to have it constantly, but when I get the episodes of diarrhea, which again occur whether I'm flaring or not. They just get worse when I'm flaring. But the pain can be very bad. And it can, for me, those episodes can occur up to 8 or so times a day. So, just so you know. You really cannot talk about mast cell disease and not talk about going to the bathroom, unfortunately. Let's see if there's anything else that I personally experienced that they've left out. I can never know how to say it. Graffia, I think is how it's pronounced. And what that is if you take your... Oh, sorry, I moved the wrong way. And I couldn't do that. And it really, really hurt. If you take a fingernail and you write on your skin, it comes up into like a welt, and like 10 minutes later you can read it clear as day. That is actually a sign of MCAS. You can have that and not have MCAS, but it is one of the very typical signs. And so what happens is that you have all of these things that can happen with the mast cell chemicals, and you have certain triggers that you may or may not know what they are. You may or may not be able to avoid triggers. Perfumes and different odors are also very, very common triggers for people, and it makes it extremely difficult to go out and be around other people because you're constantly bombarded with odors that can trigger you. Some of us wear masks. I am doing really well right now, so I haven't had to wear my mask very often, but I do have cloth masks that I can wear, and I will put it on if I'm, like, I remember a couple months ago we were at Lowe's, I believe, or Lowe's or Home Depot, and there's a very strong chemical smell in the air, so I put it on. I'll put it on if I'm going to have to walk by people who are smoking. That's because I know that will trigger me. But anyway, so the thing is, though, for most of us, you never know when you're going to get a flare, how bad that flare is going to be, what the specific symptoms of that flare will be, how long that flare will last, whether you need to go home like right away, whether you need to go to the emergency room, or whether you can kind of wait it out. And all of those are possibilities. And all of those are possibilities, I would say, for most of us. So I can't even tell you what a typical flare looks like, because it is so different, not just from person to person, but from event to event. Me personally, the beginning of a flare for me almost always starts with, I feel just off, I don't feel well, and then I start to flush. And if those two things happen, then I know for sure I'm entering a flare. But for other people, it can be completely different. It may be that all of a sudden they feel like they're going to pass out, and then they feel like they can't breathe. Or it may be that they suddenly notice they have hives all over them. Or there's just so many variations. Anyway, so that is a quick kind of, or not that quick, but look at what mast cell disease is. You may be asking, well, isn't there treatment for this? Yes, there are treatments. However, typically, we have to be on many treatments in order to suppress these cells. Oh, excuse me. And typically it takes a long time to find out what all those treatments are. And those treatments may include diet changes, lifestyle changes, medications, and supplements. Those are sort of the 4 big ones. And also, unfortunately, this disease is a thing that changes and evolves constantly. So you can be doing absolutely fantastic, and then for reasons that may be completely unknown to you, you will suddenly start flaring again frequently. And then you have to look at everything and, try changing your diet. You have to change your meds and change your supplements and do all these different things. So, yes, it can be treated, but treatment is very, very complicated. I have been on treatment for 2.5 years. I am right now the most stable I've been in 2.5 years, but it's taken 2.5 years to get to that point. And that is not at all uncommon. And in fact, some people never, ever, ever get stable. It is possible to go into a remission, but it is not curable. This disease is absolutely not curable. It is a lifetime condition. So, and anyone who has a disease that is not curable knows that it's really depressing. It's a very depressing thing to live with when you know that you have to deal with something for the rest of your life. But I think that's good for now, that I talk longer than I meant to, which is probably going to be true for every video I do. Hopefully this was helpful to somebody out there. And again, contact me, either leave a comment or send me an email, and I will get back to you, I absolutely promise. And if you are struggling with this disease, hang in there. I know it's tough, believe me. If you wait and you hear my story, you will know that I know how hard it is. But hang in there. It can get better, will get better, but you just got to keep fighting. Okay? Bye.